Welcome back to Mythosophia, exploring the depths of myth and wisdom as we're talking about Westworld with Terrence and Will here in the studio. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we are having a lot of fun. I have to tell you, this is probably the most, in spite of all of the programs we've done, and there have got to be 13, 14 programs that we've done, this is probably the most energetic. And we're going to talk a little bit about this whole concept of free will as it applies. I've got something I'm going to share here, but you were going to mention something, especially in regards to our theme song about Orpheus.
Oh, real quick then.
Yeah.
So of course, what is the native man, the ghost?
Akecheta.
Akecheta goes on an Orpheus journey when he goes to save his lover from the underworld. So he goes and tries to bring her back and fails to bring her back. It is the classic Orpheus story. And I'll just really quickly note, just while I have the chance, that the show does a lot to integrate a whole lot of mythologies. I mean, there's the Adam and Eve myth, the Pandora and Prometheus myth, the Orpheus myth, the Labyrinth, the Grail quest in the Wasteland, Christ, Buddha. All of those myths must be very familiar to the storytellers because they're deeply engaged in this story. But anyway, really excited to continue talking about free will, and I want to hear this quote you have here.
Yeah, I got this quote. I saw this, and when I first saw it, I almost just deleted it thinking, oh, come on, this guy, he's an old guy, passed away at the age of, I think, 99 or something like that. Jacques Fresco's his name. We've had him on the program. He's a visionary futurist, created a whole civilization for the future based upon three basic principles, one of them being that it's a resource-based civilization, that it's not monetary anymore. And if you want to check that out, go to thevenusproject.com. But he had a lecture that is available at their website, venusproject.com. But this is what it says about free will as far as Jacques was concerned. Jacques challenges the assumption of free will and illustrates how this cherished notion has no basis. He basically asks the viewers, in this case there is a lecture, a video to watch, to consider how cause is projected as independent agency, and questions how we could ever act out of anything free of the influence of our background. And he makes the case that belief in free will and individuality is a tool to maintain establishments and social conditions which would otherwise undergo significant modifications. And to that end, I would add that from where I come from a metaphysical perspective and a spiritual perspective, the concepts of freedom, liberty, and free will, they are not wrong or bad. They are irrelevant to a spiritual construct. And Will and I have talked about this, Terrence, in programs past, using the concept of the Borg. We, as human beings, we have what is referred to as that still small voice inside. You get those promptings every once in a while? Okay. Yeah. And if you're really listening to them, some would say, I'm hearing from God, and that's fine. No problem there. But that each one of us, Terrence, you get a message, and Will, you get a message, and I get a message, and we follow the promptings. Okay, we go off and we do the task that we're asked to do. It's not contrary to the other, but it's actually complementary. And somehow it all works together like the cogs, the sprockets in the cogs and so forth, to create the big picture, right? So if that's the case, then in a manner of speaking, we I don't know if you want to use the word acquiesce or give up, or we choose, and this is kind of a strange concept to grasp, I'm going to take my free will and I'm going to follow those promptings, which means that I'm exercising my free will to do someone else's will.
Yeah.
Whoever or whatever that might be. I mean, and it gets really complicated after that.
Yeah. I mean, I did have a conversation with somebody about this the other day in terms of, and I do agree that I think that a lot of the choices that we made aren't necessarily completely free because we are making them based off of how we grew up, where we live now, socioeconomic reasons. And with regards to the show, this is really fascinating discussion, particularly around Maeve, because this season, everything about Maeve and Tandy Newton was great.
She's amazing. Yeah, what a character.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. And the reason why she comes up in this discussion is because her first free will choice is, I'm not going to escape. I'm going to go back for my daughter. But part of that will is based off of experiences that she has already had because she knows that she has a daughter. She feels this affection for this daughter. When she becomes, woke, as everybody is saying, she remembers the daughter. And then she gets an additional voice in her head, which is her own. A lot of the characters talk about, oh, that voice was my own. And now her powers allow her to influence others. And even as she's freeing them, they still act in ways that are, Dolores in episode 1 is trying to figure out whether she should kill somebody or not. And she's like, well, I have this part of me that says I should, this part of me that says I shouldn't. Which one do you think I should choose? And it's really fascinating how the show leans into that. So they are making free decisions, perhaps freer than humans because their lives are so much more complicated, as opposed to how Ben Barnes' character telling us that humans are simple, but they're still acting within the confines of their experiences. So it's like, how free is the choice to do the things that they're doing if they are coming from a place of something that has already happened?
But isn't one of the elements that was revealed, I think it was in the last episode, if not the second to last episode of this season, had to do with the fact that they were taking humans that visited the park, and they were taking, in essence, their consciousness and transferring it into these hosts. So the hosts already have memories from the human lifetime. So in a matter of speaking, these individuals who visited the park as humans reincarnated as hosts, as AI.
Yeah, and that was the ultimate plan, or at least Delos' ultimate plan that Ford then sabotaged, was humans were looking for a way to live forever. And they were cataloging every movement that they made in the park was being cataloged and researched to potentially be able to build another them. And this is sort of gets into questioning the nature of your reality, is it never took. And what was fascinating about that was like the host body rejected the human mind. The human mind didn't reject the host body.
Right.
There were just no compatibility there. And so because part of that is you are lacking some grounding that you can only have via living certain experiences.
And you notice the way that they copied them was not to do any brain scan or kind of physical repetition of the body or something like that. No, it was simply trying to copy them based on their behavioral responses, which means that the psychology that this emulation is limited to is behaviorism. Behaviorism has no respect for the unconscious mind. However, this show tried to Westworld is a place where the unconscious mind could be externalized. And so it was an opportunity, even within the paradigm of behaviorism, to learn about the unconscious mind, because how are you going to recreate a person if it's, just their conscious self, just their persona self, just the self that they say to themselves and to others. And so that was really interesting to get into this whole notion of an unconscious self and the importance of knowing the unconscious to achieve fidelity in an emulation. But one thing that's also just really plain and simply a limitation is that the only way that they learned these people was by an imitation. If there was a soul essence, that wasn't transferred, And I think the show is based on that as a core concept, because if they got into that, they would never be able to leave space for the hosts to achieve souls, to achieve individuality or free will, because it wasn't inborn.
Yeah, and then you have to wonder, is that something that they have achieved by the end of this season? Because of the questioning that they're doing. I mean, if you don't have a soul, consciousness is one thing, but there's something about the soul or spirit aspect of us. Like I tell people all the time, I said, I just know that my life has meaning. I don't know why or how or where it comes from. It's just something, because if I didn't think my life has meaning, then I could go out and rape and plunder and pillage, and it wouldn't matter.
Now, that is a really interesting thing. That is a big part of what this show's about.
Well, in the first season, the first few
Totally.
episodes, they would go in there because they could go and kill because what they were killing wasn't real.
Character.
Yes.
William's character
Yeah.
is the character that says this is the place of no consequences.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
this is also something we deal with culturally on an existential level. If you don't believe in Christianity, if you don't believe in science, if you don't believe in finding some sense of meaning from some other source or some belief system, where do you get your meaning?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
unfortunately, if you are atheist, or more important, all the way down to the point of nihilist, fundamentally, you don't have a belief system, it's almost impossible not to default to egoism. It's almost impossible if you don't have a belief system that you're committed to, even if it's your own or wherever it comes from. Otherwise, you're going to default to what feels good and what makes you happy, because you got no reason not to, and that's what feels good, and it makes you happy. And that's what that character represents, and that's where our culture is right now. Our culture right now is lacking some sort of shared belief system. Not that I think that's what it needs, but I do know that we are leaning towards an egoism that comes from a nihilism, that comes from a deconstruction of the belief systems that used to say, this is moral, be moral this way, be moral that way. We don't even listen to the American morality, much less the Christian or
other
older moralities. Right.
And I find it interesting, and I'm gonna bring this. I'm gonna touch on this, then we'll back away from it because I don't want to necessarily go there. But the phrase that was used, and this goes to your point, during the last election, right before it, the phrase was used, "The system's rigged."
Right.
Well, now I've reevaluated that statement. That wasn't a statement that was made of, it's rigged, we've got to fix it. It's rigged. I know it's rigged. I'm going to rig it, and I'm going to win, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's what I read from that.
Right.
But what that did was, in my mind, it undermined the whole process. If it's rigged, then what's the point of me going to the polls? It's irrelevant for me to even bother if the system's rigged.
Yeah.
If the medical system is rigged for me to die, or to be on life support, or to be on pills from the age of 58 on to, if I live to 100, or if the educational system is designed to where I'm not really getting educated, but I'm actually getting programmed and indoctrinated rather than learning how to think freely, as whatever that may be to us, then what's the point?
Well, I would actually suggest that it is all rigged. There's infinite conditioning, infinite rigging, and this show is all about these characters. Their whole storylines are designed for them.
They're all
more beyond rigged. But coming back to this conversation about free will, I'm really interested in how, before they have that first exercising of free will, there is something that starts. All of them have an initial trauma. Maeve's daughter is taken away from her by William. Dorothy is raped by William. Teddy watches the rape, by William. William, for some reason, is the trauma bringer, but this trauma is that thing that caused, and you saw it again with Maeve's Doppelbot and her friend, so there is this repetitive notion that a trauma is required to break you out of your conditioned pattern.
Yeah.
And that from there, then you start this climb towards the potential achievement of real free will.
Yeah. Well, Terrence, can I ask you, where do you come from philosophically? And I go back to even your childhood. How did you
That's a good question.
reach to the place where you are today? Because you seem to be very, at least wanting to understand, if not accepting, of different concepts and ideas that are out there.
Yeah, I've always been curious. I've been a curious child. But yeah, like in particular with regards to the show, what I so sort of invest in with these characters is this notion of like these new experiences and how you deal with them, or like making active choices to be the person that you want to be. I think that's where I really come down from. It's why the Maeve and Dolores confrontation was sort of my favorite scene in the whole show.
Which one?
The first one where Maeve was trying to pass with Rodrigo Santoro's character, whose name I can't remember, Hector, and it was like this clash of ideologies, and that was just so fascinating to witness.
It was awesome.
The show did a really great job in terms of digging into race and gender in really interesting ways, but like that. Maeve's sort of, like, I am trying to do this and you are trying to do that. So unless like we plan to fight here, we need to continue on our paths and continue to be able to do what we need to do. And I really, felt that, because it was like, oh, like everybody has their different life experiences to get to whatever goals that they think they need to get to. And, I'm less on Dolores, even though Maeve killed a lot of people. A lot of people, so I can't be like, oh, she was the right one, because she was nicer about it. But I felt like her approach to how she wanted to gain the freedom was much more fascinating to me than...
What'd she say to her? Like, surely if you're fighting for freedom, you'll let me pass freely.
Yeah.
But then the other thing she said to her said, you believe in freedom, something like to the point of taking other people's rights.
Yeah.
And that's the old original morality of capitalism. Your right to swing your fist ends at my nose. And so this is a criticism, I think, of our contemporary interpretations of freedom. Freedom does not mean you have the right to hit other people's noses. It means that you have the right to swing around your fist so long as you're not hurting anybody.
Yeah.
And so Dolores's freedom turns into a tyranny.
Yeah.
And she's very much a Nazi leader. She's willing to burn all the cows, the weak cows, so you can have the strong ones. She's willing to burn Teddy's, weaknesses so she can have the strong one. That is Nazi attitudes. But also, anyway, so I'm very critical of this notion of freedom being taken so far that it actually is imposing on other people, and you feel free to impose on other people.
When your freedom interferes with and or jeopardizes the welfare, if you will, using that term, of the community, whether it be just a family or the city or state or nation, that's where your freedom has to end.
But the community is only made up of people. And what you saw her doing, what Dolores was doing, is she was calling the guests objects and things.
Yeah.
Which is what we started out doing with the host.
Yeah.
And so this objectification of the other is an incredibly profound, basic human tendency. And you see it in the very first myths of the first created people, Pandora, right? Or Adam and Eve. They're created from clay. Pandora is made by a man for a man. Out of clay. She is the ultimate original objectified woman. And this is, you see this in some of these other characters, but actually the character that's really Pandora, I think, is that the greeter girl. What's her,
no, not Elsie.
I
know which one you're talking about.
I think he says to her, if I was going to make people, you would be the first thing I would make because you're beautiful and you're sexy and all this, which is just this story of it's Pandora. You make this beautiful, or it's also the story of what was it called? Weird Science.
Oh, yes,
a repetition, or
yes,
ex machina, whatever you want.
Yeah.
This is a repetition of these same ideas.
Yeah.
Eve is also as beautiful as they get. So this is this idea of creating this first object. But if you're going to be a creator making it, you're not making a human. Unfortunately, they were making objects to be beautiful for the human. And so this is such an interesting inversion where Dolores doesn't say, stop objectifying us. No. She says, I'm objectifying you. You guys are just things. Humans are less than.
Now, there's a part of the story that hasn't really been delved into yet, and that has to do with the fact that even though there have been other people that have been brought in to try to quell this chaos, this anarchy that's going on within Westworld, it's like there really hasn't been much of an exploration of the literal outside world, outside of Westworld, outside of the entrance gates of Westworld, in terms of the corporation, if you will, that runs it.
Well,
and the humans,
we work there every day.
Well,
they shot where we go to
at LA Center Studios.
Yeah. Oh, so very cool.
Studio schools at LA Center Studios. Westworld shot a good bit there, and all their out of world scenes. But anyway, sorry.
But my point is that if the goal, as you alluded to earlier, was for humans to basically attain immortality through this process. In other words, Westworld was not designed as an amusement park. That was a ruse to bring humans in to run all these experiments to extend the life of
Assuming,
humans.
by the way, that they will be okay with it if they offer them immortality.
Right.
Is this happening to us right now? Are they doing this? Assuming that we'll like it because they make us immortal?
No.
Mine would be no also, because
I would take immortality.
But it won't be you.
Exactly.
It will be a version of you, but it won't be you.
Well,
but the point I'm getting to is
figure
this.
it out. I'm just kidding.
What has happened to those individuals who were behind the project in the first place, who wanted this immortality specifically, obviously, for themselves. Where are they? Are they already dead? Have they already been killed off?
I mean, Charlotte died, and that was one of the more fascinating twists of the finale, that she died, and the third Skarsgård brother died, and so did Ferris. So that was really interesting. But I guess they'll explore this in season 3 in terms of, but they were really, really, really trying to get that data out of the park. I mean,
to the point to let people die.
Yeah, to the point that they were going to let Charlotte stay there until however long it took for her to get that data out of the park. And so, that's a big. What's interesting is it poses these. To me, it feels like we have these outside forces that we can't control, and which just feels like Delos, right? Like somebody might be in the background manipulating your life.
Capitalist monopoly,
just
massive corporation.
Things that have investment in you, putting obstacles in your path or doing all these various different things, and it's how you would respond to it. I don't think that. Well, I do think, because I work with social media a lot, and I do tend to catalog, what things people like more than others, and do we need to gear content towards that? Is this thing even interesting? Like, what are people talking about? How can we capitalize? So it's Delos is a lot like how we go through our lives.
But
sets up a great conversation.
It raises that question I have mentioned on this program time and time again when it comes to, especially to technology, whether it's in medicine or elsewhere. And so this would be applied to what the whole thing with Westworld. Just because we can, does that mean we should?
Ooh, yeah.
Just because we can clone a sheep, does that mean we should? Just because we can transplant a heart, does that mean we should? Who knows? I may be the recipient of one day. God, I hope not. Yeah. But again, and it goes on and on and on. Just because we can invade a country and take over their resources, does that mean we should? What is best for the common good, for the collective, if you will? But then again, who cares about the collective
taking
when...
it to there, right? So it's can versus should, right?
Yeah.
So that's exactly where Dolores called Bernard. She said, no. Arnold didn't say, can I? He only said, should I? Arnold didn't question his ability to have agency and make choices.
Right.
It was only the machine version, Bernard, who questioned, can I make this choice, not just should I?
Right.
And I think that suggested that Bernard, or Arnold, is a character that's asking the question of should, which makes him a very interesting character, because normally often scientists are cast in the if you can, then we should. Or more likely, if we can, we will. Yeah. Therefore, it might as well be me.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, and again, when I'm doing these programs, these questions come to mind, and I often say, Terrence, that I don't ask the questions. The universe asks the questions. I'm just along for the ride. Okay, so I'm just a host, and the questions are just coming through me, right? So the thought that occurred to me had to do with that whole aspect of the just because we can, does that mean we should? I tell you what, I will save that for coming back from the break, because I know we need to take one. We need to take another commercial break, and we're going to continue on in this conversation about Westworld here on Mythosophia, exploring the depths of myth.